is Kimono-san of St. Louis, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you all came today. I've been looking forward to it. We are presenting the history of kimono, so I hope you learn a little something that you might be able to apply to some of your cosplays, because I see some cute little kimonos out here today. So we're going to start with kimono's great-grandmother. This was introduced to Japan from China, because if you've seen the hanfus, the large flowing sleeves, that's really where kimono came from. They did wear that, but only for a brief point of time, and then they started to evolve. It started to change into a more Japanese form. Because this was the court costumes of the Shioku dynasty. This is again based on the Chinese from the time. But you'll notice the sleeves are smaller. The sleeves are tubular. The women are wearing skirts underneath their robes. And if you look at the collars, they're not actually crossed. They're rounded. And this actually comes from the Chinese court. And this would actually be present in the Japanese court for ceremonial garb well into the 21st century. So after a while, things became longer, sleeves became wider, and kimono really started to evolve into the shape that we see today with the large square sleeves and a rectangular body. And it's very, very popular to wear the long open kimono in the 11th century. This is where you start seeing the Japanese-specific textiles as opposed to the imported Chinese or just the very plain browns and greens and earthy reds. Something else you'll notice is underneath these open layers, she's got this what looks like a red skirt. These are actually the pants. This actually evolved from the pants and the skirts worn under the jackets in the earlier century. But if you'll notice, her top is tucked in, much like you see what I'm wearing today. This is going to be standard. Your kimono gets tucked into your pants. This is where that really starts. Something else you notice is if you look at the collar, you get all these different colors. And this is really where you start to see the Japanese flair for color coordinating. I think maybe some of you are familiar with Genji Monogatari or the anime movie versions of The Tale of Genji. This is that time period. This is when Japanese clothing became a language. You could wear different colors to signify the time of year. And they would have seasonal names like summer pine or winter frost or sakura. And then it also communicated status. Because if you look at her pants, they're red. Only a married woman could wear red hakama in her court garb. If you weren't married, or if you were a little girl, you would wear a maroonish purple. And also something that you're going to see throughout Japanese fashion with kimono is the outer layer. Right now she's wearing 12 to 15, and those are called kochiki, or little coats. And they will eventually evolve into the uchi kake, which would be a much larger robe, and you'll see that in later centuries. And then we also have the peasant wear, or the clothing of the imperial ladies' maid. Again, you see the hakama skirt, but this one is not the pants style. This one is an actual wraparound skirt worn on top of the kimono, much like what you saw them wearing prior to the 11th century when they were importing style from China. And at the end of the 11th century, this is really where you stop seeing the wrap skirt style. And it starts to become more of a four-strapped pant at the end of the 11th century. Because you'll see here the men are also wearing the same kind of pant, be it shorter. And then on top of this, you'll see a wider coat that still has the round collar on top, that buttons on the side. This is actually a very Chinese style with a more Japanese sleeve added to it. And the hats even that he's wearing, this cap of state that you would be allowed to wear to court, this also came from China. So we still have a strong Chinese influence even though kimono is really starting to evolve into its own style. And again, you will see the color is very important because, like I said, it communicates status. It doesn't just communicate marital status. His court robes are orange, and he's a mid-level courtier. Whereas if he was a young man, about 16 or 17, and he had just entered court service, he'd have worn light blue. This is the color of the scribe. So this will tell you where on the hierarchy you stand. Because in the 11th century, there were color combinations that you could not wear unless you had imperial permission from the emperor or the empress themselves. And these were called the forbidden colors. And they were combinations of purple and red, but due to the fact that any kind of documentation on the exact dye formulas and how long you left the fabric in the dye, and how you layered those fabrics on top of each other on the cuffs of your kimono, that's been lost. So no one really knows anymore what the exact forbidden color combination is. Even the imperial court of the 21st century still uses these kinds of costumes for the New Year's celebration, Shinto ritual, and imperial weddings. They don't even have the imperial colors that were allowed anymore. That's been lost to time. So even though things have become more casual in the 21st century, you still see a lot of the carryovers from the 11th century.